Hey, Ange, how are you?
Hey, doing great, doing great. We're really happy to do this episode today. It's kind of an impromptu. We're going to talk about everything that's happening in the world, and we felt very called to actually do this episode the week of the election. There's a lot of collective angst, a lot of feels, a lot of things happening. So, tune in. I hope this provides some value. But yeah, so Jess, why don't you kick us off with, kind of what are you picking up on right now with the
Yeah.
collective, with how you're feeling?
Oh, this is like such a big deal episode. We usually record everything in advance. So first of all, I just want to say that it is Monday, November 4th, 2024. So we're on the eve, so to speak, of I believe one of the biggest turning points in history. And I really felt this calling to come on here and talk to the collective because I'm on the TikTok a lot, and I know a lot of people are. I think it's a really interesting platform. Social media is a really interesting thing, but I'm really observant. So um over the past several years, I've become very detached from narratives. And I'm in much more of a place of observation. Like, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I wonder, what the truth is in that. I wonder what the truth is in that. And it's a really different place than I was. So I'm going to go backwards just a little bit. During the pandemic, I did a lot of more polarizing things, and it felt really important to the location I was in. A lot of people associated it with politics. That was the interesting time about 2020 is we had this global event. America was sitting in really the center of this hotbed of things happening. We had an election on, on the table. We had viewpoints. Things were politicized, and it just neighbor against neighbor, family member against family member, and and I remember the calling I had during that time, and it was more of a fight, fight, fight call, and it sort of ended. And now let's fast forward into 2024. And we have this political landscape again, but the feeling to me is just tremendously different. It is so different. And so, first of all, I think it would be interesting just to kind of help people see, where do we stand on this? And this is just something you and I talk about. It's our viewpoint. I have my own values and beliefs. So, first of all, I have those. I don't believe in force feeding anybody my viewpoints, my values, or beliefs. I believe in every human being's right to their sovereignty and however that shows up for them. Whatever their belief systems are, I fully encourage people to follow through with what they feel compelled to do. So I'm going to put that out there first. I am, in a way, a very neutral observer. And that means more, it's not so much that I'm like, well, I'll vote for anybody. I think that there's a lot of ways to look at this. Like some people don't vote at all. They're not going to participate in the story at all. And there's people that are going to vote left, and there's people that are going to go right. And everybody has the reason. I fully believe in that. As for me, I think we're at this massive turning point as a society, and I can see the viewpoints on all sides. And what a weird place to really exist, and also a freeing place to exist. It gives you, before anything, compassion for the fear, which I want to talk about too, that people are living in, and why they do the things they do. So I want to just set the foundation here. I don't think Angie and I are in the game of going vote Republican, vote Democrat, don't vote at all. That is not the message we're sending out. What we're hoping to really send out to people in this is maybe to just kind of like be able to step back a little bit and look at it from a different vantage point, because there could be a lot more than meets the eye, but it's not that complicated in my opinion. I just think people are a little bit veiled um, due to the lives we've led and what we're programmed to receive and know. So I wanted to just preface that I'm really excited about doing this. It's a little spontaneous and we're going to post it, on the election day. So yeah. So anyway, Angie, what are your thoughts about that?
Ditto. I mean, so much of what you said, we talk about this all the time. And we really, in our growth journeys have had to question everything within ourselves, right? Like, that really is a part of the process of any evolution is the old beliefs, the old paradigms no longer fit. And that also means that sometimes the political landscape is reflective of that within your own values, within your own belief sets, but also really a part of what I think, the Bible speaks to all these ascended masters and just great minds talk about, kind of always being open, to a different perspective, always being open to the fact that we're human.
Yeah.
What is it? To be human is to err, or to err is be human. It's something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's as humans, we are not perfect. And
Hmm.
that's amazing. Our political leaders are not perfect. But so often in a lot of what I'm seeing that, the compassion in me aches because I see people that are on this growth path, but getting so caught up in outsourcing their power, believing one candidate or the other is going to deeply impact and change the course of their life. And that's not true at all. We give up so much um, of our own sovereignty, of our own abilities when we believe something outside of us has that level of power. And as we know, everything mirrors what's already within. So, there are elements of that where we don't feel like we have the control within, and thereby we think something outside of us is controlling us. And
Hmm.
so there's so many elements of this as like a psychological and interesting thing to observe that it's like, wow, look at how interestingly it is that people are really falling into a lot of fear, falling into the belief that only this way is the right way. When I remember was it 2016 when Trump won the election? I was in a very different place. And there was a level of initially like, oh, I was expecting to wake up and hear that a different candidate won. Interesting. And it was him. And I was like, okay. And, even then I was not on the path I'm on right now to the level. But I quickly thought, you know what? Let's see what happens here. This could be so much better than we imagine. And what a different level of energy versus, oh my God, I need to take the week off and grieve what I thought was going to happen. And I was just very neutral, like, okay, let's just see what's going to happen here. And that's really how I look at everything right now is first of all, from a higher level, I don't have the control externally of any of that. I can control myself, my, level of peace and happiness within because I don't put it on outside things, and I'm working really hard on recognizing when my energy is draining for things that are beyond my control and bringing it back to, okay, what experience are we going to get from this? And I think regardless of the outcome, whatever, and I don't even want to say sides because, we are all one, but because of the nature of how this is set up, people are put in two sides, or they're, hey, I'm a libertarian. I don't want to participate in that. And I want a third party. Cool. Love that as well. I think we all should speak our voices. However, we need to come back to that. Like, as you said, it's a democracy. People have a right to express their opinions, to express their perspectives. And those that have an opinion that differs from yours is perfectly perfect for them because they are basing their vote, their interpretation of the world on their lived experiences. And I can't argue that. I can't say you're wrong because you want to do this, because to you, that is the perfect solution. That is what you need or what your lens of the world reflects. And so I think the biggest message, I hope to convey in this podcast is really it's time to reclaim our power, that whatever's happening around us within, we can always find that amount of peace, so don't leak power thinking whatever outcome is going to happen is going to be terrible. I truly, truly believe, and this is not Pollyanna, I just want to acknowledge whatever is happening for the highest good of humanity, the end. Everything, even the things that are tragic, and don't seem good. I mean, let's just talk about for a hot second Peanut the squirrel. Okay, that was a big thing that went viral this last week in New York where um, a squirrel and I think a raccoon were euthanized. They were taken from a sanctuary. The feds were called in. Is ludicrous that we're spending our resources going after a delightful little squirrel that was in a sanctuary. That's happening to also rise up collective
Mhm.
anger. Here's the thing, anger is not a bad thing, and I did a post on this recently in talking with a client. Anger can be the biggest catalyst, the highest energy to cultivate, to create change. So everything that's happening that's rocking you to the core, harness that energy for good. Allow that to be the catalyst to say, something's not right here. We're not going to stand for this. Like, we're taking down a lovely family who has a sanctuary because of just some ludicrous stuff that, is going on. But again, it's waking people up. People are pissed. People are really, really upset. And also saying this is an overreach of our rights as people. Like, who are you to say that I can't love on nature? Who are you to say that I can't do things that help bring harmony to our planet? And it's squashed. And that's also bringing about that desire for us to rise up and reclaim control, and again, bringing it back to us as the individual. So, I could talk forever about all this stuff, but I think that's also a shining example of kind of just how outrageous some of the things are getting to wake us up. And it's all happening for us, all of it.
All of it. You know what? I want to bring this point out too. I had this kind of pop into my mind last night while I was trying to fall asleep. And I've thought it before, but I think, I was really supposed to talk about it because I think people that they're on the path, they see it. We know them. I relate to them. They are angry. And anger is really important. Here's why it's really important though. The entire collective The entire collective has been in an abusive relationship with this thing we call our government.
Mhm.
It is the classic abuse cycle, right? It's the same as the problem reaction solution. It is, a classic abuse situation is love bombing, bring you in, tension rises, right? It creates discourse, and then something bad happens. And then we have the crisis. And then, you might get to that anger stage, but then it comes back in and it saves you. And now we have the hero again. And this goes round and round. And what it does is it creates chemical spikes within us as people. And
Mhm.
that is insanity. That is insanity. And it's been happening to us for so very, very long that now we're just in this cycle. So people who are really sold on, I have to vote for this person to win because if they don't win, we're all done. We're all done. They are really buying into the narrative that people go through in traditional abuse. There's no hope because, well, this person might be the income earner, or this person does this, or this person does that. And so I just really want to say there's no shame. I understand why people are there. I understand why people do it. But it really is just like a classic case of Stockholm syndrome. So for people to get angry, they're starting to get out of it, right?
Right.
Because that's the first sign that the anger is what propels us to whatever the next thing is. And most of the time, there's growth, right? I mean, there's always a choice, but anger is important. So there's righteous anger. And biblically speaking, Jesus got angry. I
Mhm.
think about that story all the time. He flipped over the tables in the tabernacle, right? He was mad, and we should be angry about what's happening to children. We should be angry about innocence being corrupted and harmed. We absolutely should be angry about that. But what are you going to do with it?
Correct. And that is
Where
exactly that is the point right there. What are you going to do with that energy? Because sitting on social media and blasting opinions and blasting hate, does nothing to move you forward. And, my husband used to get on me a couple of years ago for talking about some of the environmental stuff that we deal with. And, at first he's like, that's tinfoil. And as he started to understand, he's like, oh, there's legitimacy here, right? And he's like, why are you drowning yourself in this stuff? And I said, it's not that I'm drowning myself in this stuff. It's that I'm allowing that fuel to continue to have conversations with others around me because I'm not the one that's going to take that on, but I might influence or impact someone who is the person who takes that on. And that's the power we have is having constructive conversations, having things that say, how can I move this forward? And if I can't control it, again, how can I return within and find that peace, right? Because we've talked about, there's people at every level of growth. And, when you and I have a mutual friend who they are out there spreading a lot of what I would kind of say truther stuff. And it's important information. And they're at the level of really standing on the rooftops yelling, don't you see what's happening? Look at this. Here's examples of this. Here's what's going on. And they're fueled by by a lot of emotion. That's necessary too, because you know what? There was a point in my development where I looked to someone like that to say, yes, see, okay, I'm not crazy. This is happening. And then, you kind of move through it. And then, okay, how can I alchemize this? How can I, again, become the neutral observer and say, okay, all of this is happening. Humans are humaning. But really, even higher level, this is meant to divide us. All of it's meant for division. We cannot be powerful when we're divided, where our power is lessened when we're divided. And we saw what happened weeks back with the hurricane. I think it was at Milton or where there were collective prayers done. It was supposed to hit Florida at a category 5. Collective prayer, collective intention, collective visualization happened. And that hurricane dropped from a 5 to, I think, a 2 or a 3 before it hit landfall. That is the power when we come together and have a focused initiative on something that we can influence. And it's like, there's not enough attention on that because there's so many, I don't want to say false flags, but things that are capturing our attention left and right that are keeping us all over the place. And we can't stay focused because we're constantly getting nailed with all these kind of false flags or distractors or things that are coming up. And it's again, how do we bring it back to, first of all, what do I have control of? It's like very little. Like I can control kind of myself-ish, and I can influence those around me a little bit, but that's about it. So really the way we influence or make change is it always comes back to we have to go within first, like be the change you want to see in this world. And that's really the work that we are all being asked is what within has to change to reflect outward this positive experience? Can we find unity within, connection to God, universe, source, whatever you call the divine, to understand that we're not isolated on an island. We're here having this experience. We're all reflecting each other back at each other. And you can take the situation and say we are in absolute hell. What's about to happen is going to be atrocious, or you can say, okay, let's just see what unfolds. How is this helping me grow? How is
Yeah.
it, what am I meant to experience in this? And that is the neutral observer. And I think this doesn't just pertain to politics. This pertains to any crisis we're in or any perceived crisis. It's all about interpretation. Two people can be in the same situation and have vastly different experiences simply because they interpret it differently. They make a different meaning out of it. Like, how empowering is it to say, regardless of what happens out there, I'm good.
Mhm.
I feel light saying that versus, oh my God, if a certain candidate doesn't win, it's over for us. Like we're screwed. It's all going to go to hell. Taxes are going to go through the roof. Whatever's going to happen, they're going to cut jobs and like, oh my goodness, how frantic is that?
Yeah.
It feels so different, right?
Yeah. This is the conversation of freedom and fear. My two favorite, okay, yeah, two of my top favorite F words, freedom and fear. They actually, it's probably more like you.
I have a
Um,
top favorite F word.
I sure do. So freedom and fear. I really have learned over the last several years that people don't truly want what freedom is. Because freedom, if you really think about what freedom is, you are free from any groupthink. You're free from any narrative. You're free from any, community bind. You are free. And so number one, there's this whole talk about freedom, and we all want it, but truth be told, we have a country, uh well, I guess, what do they call it? A democratic republic or whatever it is. Uh that has what it does because people were afraid of what true freedom meant. So there are rules and there are structures and there were these things that were built. And then you have fear. So freedom is a very powerful word with a lot of power behind it. But then you have fear. So you look around and you can look. You can open your eyes and you can choose to see it. And you could say, am I afraid if I don't? Am I afraid if I do? Are they scaring me? Is this creating fear in me? That's where you're going to have to go to find freedom. Because if you are motivated through fear, and we're all going to have different thresholds of where we get motivated by that, but that's what you're a slave to. So you look around this nation, which you can argue is great, is not great, has historical greatness or not. I've heard every tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, paganism, Christian viewpoint that's ever existed over the years. And at the end of the day, I just go, you know what? I know I'm not supposed to be afraid because I know that fear is going to enslave me to something that's not working to my highest benefit.
Right.
It's not going to work to my highest benefit. And so when we think about freedom, we think about fear, we have to really think about what that means to each one of us. You should be thinking about both sides of that. And I don't care what you choose to do. What I care about deeply as a person is that you find your sovereignty. I encourage people to try to achieve their own freedom. Be free from the things that handcuff you to a doctrine, to an ideology, to a group think, because it's no better than a cult. And in this world, that is our job now. That's my job. It's not to tell you who to vote for. It's not to put you down, call you a sheep, call you a Nazi. There's all these things out there. And I just keep thinking, all I hear is fear.
Mhm.
And so you're enslaved. And again, that's the abusive relationship. That's what happens to people who are abused. They will defend their abuser. They
Mhm.
will fight for their abuser because to shift is too scary. What if it is true?
Right. And, I can imagine some people listening, might say, "Well, what about their desire to take away our rights as women?" Okay, okay, that's a valid thought,
Mhm.
and I personally haven't heard a single candidate say, "We are gonna go back to the 1600s, where women are doing whatever they're doing." Like, I don't care which side you're on, I have not heard that from either side. And, a big argument I hear from people is the pro life or pro choice opportunity. With the changes that were made earlier on, I think it was 2020, where it was put back in the state's control. This is no longer a Trump versus Kamala discussion. So if that's the stand that you're on to make an argument for either side, they don't have control. So even if you're pro-life and preaching Trump, he doesn't have control of that anymore. If you're pro-choice and Kamala, she doesn't have control. That is up to your state. So that also becomes then exert your power as someone who can vote if that is something you want to participate in
And it
and vote
comes
at a
down
state
to your
level.
local, that comes back to you locally. I learned that in 2020, living where I do, there was a huge thing happening with our public health.
Mhm.
And there were, I mean, there was an army created to stop things happening, but it was never on the federal level. It was
Correct.
always on the local. And so again, and I want to talk about that too with women's rights. I see it a lot too. I am a woman. I want sovereignty over my body,
Mhm.
but I also want to be morally aligned. It's both. I want both. Now, I also want people to acknowledge, are they being told this by a news source? Are they getting repetitive statements, or are they hearing it on the campaign trail by these people saying, we want to abolish women's rights
Well,
over
and
their
even
own
within
right?
that, if you're saying I'm on the campaign trail, is it a snippet of a conversation that was distorted? Because we are seeing so much of that. And,
It's
you know,
AI.
this might be controversial, but fuck it, we're going to go there. I had listened to the Joe Rogan podcast where he interviewed Trump and then JD Vance. And I really wish that Kamala would have taken the opportunity so we could see, her as a human outside of the politics. What do you stand for? And I will tell you, when you sit down human to human, I think with most any human at the foundation, we are all good. I don't inherently think people are evil. And it was really neat to see, the interviews and see people being human and real and saying, I don't know a lot about this. Let's talk more. I'd love to learn. And, I think that is at the end of the day, what we have to acknowledge is that I don't inherently think there's this conspiracy to, have all these negative things happen and all that. Like, are there insidious undertones at times? For sure. I mean, I think we can acknowledge that some of the things that are happening don't feel right. However, human to human to human, is anybody up there just trying to do terrible things? I don't know. I don't think so. Um, do they have differing viewpoints on life experiences? Absolutely. Um, and to bring it back to control, a lot of also what we hear is inflation and finances. And I know a lot of people are feeling it hardcore, like we're in some interesting economic times. And I think the thing is that we do live in an abundant universe. So even if our tax rate's 50%, there's opportunities to always create more expansion. There's opportunities to opt out of the taxation system, right? Do your research. Like there's ways around this where you're never a victim to external circumstances. And it feels like it. Like you and I talk about this a lot where it's like, why is this happening? And I've been crushed by a lot of lessons lately. And in that, it's also highlighting what no longer aligns for me. It's not the absolute truth any longer that life is happening to me. It's not the absolute truth that I am not worthy because I am. Like there's all these things that if you're being triggered right now by all this stuff, look at what's trying to come to light to leave. The higher is always trying to get in. And so if things are triggering you, this is a time to stop and say, what's this really about? I don't feel safe. I don't feel heard. I don't feel like I have a lot of control. There's always something beneath
Mhm.
all of that, right? And with women, a lot of it, there's a lot of stuff out there telling us we don't have rights. I don't feel in any way like I don't have every option possible. It's my
Right.
choice to decide what I want to do with my life. And I don't feel personally suppressed. And if a person does, I would challenge them to say, look at what's beneath that.
Mhm.
What's happening that's making you feel that, or what within, rather, not what's happening, but what within is reflecting that within you? Was it because you grew up in a home where you were always silenced? For sure. I feel that.
Mhm.
Did you grow up in a home where you didn't feel safe? For
Mhm.
sure. I deeply feel that. Um, so there's always more to the triggers. And, we've done episodes on triggers, and this is one collective fucking trigger right now. Like, as
Well,
a species, we are being triggered left and right. And that's by design, because when you're triggered, it pulls you into the darkness, it pulls you into the bullshit. And if you stay there, they've won. Like that is intentional. Whereas if you continue to kind of look at it and get curious, again,
mhm.
what a different energy. Like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting, this is happening. Okay,
Yep.
I'm kind of curious about this. What's going to unfold? When you and I have had friends reach out about concerns with the election and all this stuff, and kind of wanting us to go into the dark with them, but also wanting a perspective. And it's like, we're not going to go there with you. That's not what this is about. Like, we're not gonna spiral, we're not gonna spin. I
Mm-mm.
got my popcorn ready because 'cause I'm curious. I'm like, "What's about to unfold? This is interesting." And, we talked, I don't think we've talked about this in other episodes, but there's a really great book called The Fourth Turning, and if you haven't read it, it's really, really cool. We as humans tend to, we work in cycles, and about every 100 years or so, there's a new cycle beginning. And the last kind of fourth turning was around the world wars, the 20s, 30s, 40s. And that was a time of a new era entering in. And, you can go back, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years and see the cycles of time where, like, literally like clockwork, nearly every 100 years, there's this collective shift. And we are in that phase, and Christians may say it's end times, but it's more an end of an era. It's an end of a way of being. And I think what we're stepping into is this mass expansion of consciousness, this mass expansion of you've always had the resources within. And for that to happen, old systems are probably going to crumble. And I had seen someone uh, online getting really upset about, I think Elon Musk had said something to the effect of, things are going to get rough going forward. And they
Mhm.
were pissed. They're like, that's not how it should be. And, they were very upset that someone would say, it's like labor, people. In order to birth something new, there is going to be a death of the old. And that's not pretty. You and I have had babies. Labor is not pretty. It's the most profoundly beautiful, amazing experience, and also simultaneously really fucking painful. And that is, and it's the death of the collective ego. It's the death of the old paradigms and ways of being. And when you threaten the old way of doing things, it's uncomfortable. Highly, even if on the other side it's rainbows and unicorns, that transitional phase is highly uncomfortable. And so, you know, um, I don't know that this is the most important election of our lifetime, but we are in a really massive time of change, and there
Mhm.
happens to be an election. That's probably a part of that catalyst.
Mhm.
So, there's also like these shifts, and so many people are feeling this right now. They're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like something's going to happen. And yes, and if anyone tells you they know, they're full of shit. None of us
Yeah.
have any idea. like,
No.
even the best psychics and channelers out there have no idea because we are evolving so rapidly that the possibilities are constantly changing.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about different timelines, different
Mhm.
opportunities. Like when we were little and you had those alternate ending books, this is where we're at. There's consistently alternate endings popping up left and right based on where we are at collectively. And that's also a part of this kind of fourth turning process. So if that book interests you, it's wildly fascinating. It's dense. It's a lot of very historical information, but it's educational. And it's like, oh, humans doing human things, continuing to do cycles, but we have this opportunity to have it not be the collapse of Rome, but rather to be this ascension that I don't know that we've ever really had, this like transformation into something so profoundly cool that doesn't result in, war and all these really awful things. But
Mhm.
that's to be determined. None of us know what's going to happen. And as things do unfold, stay in your sovereignty. Stay in trust that this is happening for us, not to us. If something goes down in the coming months, hold your sovereignty,
Yeah.
hold your peace, phone a friend. We've got each other. We constantly are talking about, okay, interesting. Let's see what's happening here. What are you feeling about this? What are you noticing? How are you doing? And that's going to be really important to have people that don't drown it down into the fear with you, but rather kind of help you ascend and move through this. And again, rise above as a neutral observer. What's
Mhm.
unfolding now is all for the expansion of man, and it might feel scary and it might feel like labor, but trust the process, please. I mean, I've never felt more convicted to say trust the process. Everything's always working out for us.
Yeah. This is going to be a time of a lot of emotions. And, I will kind of say, I do believe this is the most important election our world has ever seen. I think all eyes are on the United States of America. And again, I don't know what's going to happen. I have felt this profound kind of like pulling since early 2018. Um, really, really felt it. And watching it unfold has been a bit of a miraculous thing. And again, I'm really open, right? I know at the end of the day, I'm fine. And that's the thing, regardless of what happens, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there won't be harm on some levels. That doesn't mean any of that. It just means I'm surrendering to that. But it doesn't mean I'm going to sit in traffic either. And that's the other side of this. So I want to talk a little bit just about how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare ourselves? Some people are like, well, I'm going to go buy all the pew pews that I can and hold down the fort. Okay. Okay, that's fair. But this goes beyond that. This goes to how do I protect my soul? How do I protect my mind? We had done another episode, which I think will probably air after this one now. I think it was supposed to air at this time on detoxing and scarcity and everything. And in there, we talk about how it's mind, body, soul. This is mind, body, soul. This is mind, body, soul. And, there's a lot of people out there that hang their, and I'm just going to say it, their religion on Christianity. Beautiful, beautiful people. But I see them living in extraordinary fear. And again, I believe in everybody's choice, but I want them to sit with that. And I want them to go back and count how many times the actual Bible, the book that you follow, tells you to fear not. Fear not. The storm will come, but you are safe. And that is what resides in you, is the ability to really, really know that. So preparedness also means be prepared to stay home if you need to. Make common sense moves. It doesn't mean you go buy all the damn toilet paper again. Don't do that. Use a towel, wash it. I don't care what you do. Don't do that. That was dumb. We should not be doing that. But it does mean have what you need for a little while, because that is part of being prepared too. It brings you peace. I'm prepared mentally. I'm prepared physically. I'm prepared in nourishment, my mind, my body, and my soul. The other thing that I think would be kind of interesting to talk about, and again, these are just random thoughts, random opinions. This is not God's gospel truth, and nor are we making predictions. But I think it's kind of fun to talk about all the things that might happen, because I think about it. I'm human. You think about it. We talk about it. People ask me about it. And I'm always very careful about telling people what to think. In 2020, I was labeled, which is, I almost wore the t-shirt today, Angie. I almost wore it, Propaganda Barbie. And I thought that is such a funny name to give somebody. They did it because I have long blonde hair, whatever. And I almost wore it today because I wore it proudly when I spoke on stages about just freedom. That was my propaganda. I was just talking about how to become a free thinker. Don't buy into what I say, just start thinking on your own. So I do want to talk about just some different ways this could play out. And maybe it won't at all. And so I'm going to go first, and then I would love to hear what you think could happen. So I think one of the ways I foresee things playing out that feels like the most real to me is that an election will happen as scheduled tomorrow. And as everyone knows, we just have a president elect until January. And so in that time frame, I think one of my favorite theories is that we will have the president elect, and between now and then things are going to get a little shaky and a little rocky. And I'm just going to say, I feel like Joe Biden might not be on the scene anymore, and maybe we'll have a different president. And I think that they're going to try to maybe prevent somebody from coming into office, and and there could just be some civil unrest. I think that's what they're trying to get. I feel like that's the agenda, because when we infight, there's just more control to the person that's stirring the pot. So I kind of foresee that being the situation um, in my mind. That's the one that feels the most logical to me. But I would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, well, what I want to just preface this too with this is not to spread fear. And I think, part of some of the things that are going around online concern me a little bit because when you get mass buy-in, you can mass manifest stuff happening as well. And so, um, I'm a little hesitant to say anything about what could happen, because I don't want to get people into this idea that any specific thing is going to go down. There's a lot of theories, and people are very attached to feeling like we're moving into a civil war or that, there might be like a power grid failure. There's a lot of things. Um, I'm just gonna say I know that it's gonna be rocky. What that's gonna look like, I don't know. But like I do have a little bit of reserve stuff in our home if something were to happen where we wanted to stay in, for a little while, or um we just felt called to not be out in the public as much. When we've talked about plans, like if I do want to leave because something's happening, we've got some options as well. And so, as you said, let's not hoard toilet paper. Let's not, that what a, when we look back, like what a weird ass thing to like attach to. Like, why toilet paper? Why not like something useful like water or
Yeah.
food? Toilet paper. There's so many other options. Anyways, what a weird ass time. Like where the paper manufacturers just back, they're like, hey, let's create some mass panic on toilet paper, put out the news that there's a shortage and freak people out. I have no idea. It's kind of funny in hindsight. Now like you just got to watch for the toilet paper hoarders, right? Like, who are you? I'm just kidding. But I think be smart. Don't be in fear. I think just have, it's kind of like Y2K, right? Everyone was like, oh my God, our computers aren't prepared to go from 1999 to 2000. And there was this mass panic.
Yes.
And my mother was like hoarding food and made us fill up our bathtub with water. Like it's crazy making in hindsight completely. And actually was during the time. Um, but, if you feel called to have something prepared, do it. If you don't and you're like, I feel peace around it, then don't.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that whichever side gets in, and again, I hate using the word sides, but that's what's happening right now. I think the other side, there's going to be an uproar. Because I don't know, and I'm cautious to say this because I'm sure there were other times in history but I don't know that there's been a time where we've been this polarized politically. I mean, the smear campaigns are just out of control. The just abuse online that I see people engaging in, and just false information. Um, so I think people are not going to wake up super happy when the results come in. Either way, like people, there's going to be one demographic that's thrilled because Jesus has come back to earth, and there's one that's like, oh my God, the devil's in the office.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've got some extra stuff if necessary, and we'll see what happens. But I think truly, I have not been more optimistic. And
Yeah.
again, this is not because I'm Pollyanna. I have my own shit and my own struggles. Um, but this is a part of a very significant turning point. And again, I think historically this is happening regardless, but it happens to be that this election is also a catalyst to what's already unfolding. And I think there was a lot of conversation about even just timeline jumps, with the assassination attempts on Trump. Like, there's no way from a standpoint of like physics or looking at, the dynamics of how that played out that that man should have been alive still. And he is. And it's like, again, love him or hate him, it was interesting to see like that there's no reason that he should be here. And wow, incredible. And again, if you're someone on the other side saying, I wish he would have been gone, reflect on yourself, please, because that's such a low vibrational, horrible viewpoint to wish anybody off this planet. I don't care who they are. But yeah, I think there's so much happening that we're rapidly shifting timelines, rapidly shifting up like outcomes and opportunities. And, we'll see. We will, I'm sure, be reflecting on this in the coming weeks, as this might throw our podcast schedule off a little bit because I don't know what's going to happen. And, you and I talked like we're not in a rush to make a lot of plans right now for the future because so much is unfolding and we're in this massive transformational stage. of, the next month or two is going to be really interesting. But I'm not fearful. Please don't be fearful. Please don't take anything that we said today to be in any way inciting any level of fear. The best thing you can do is just get quiet within yourself and reflect on what's coming up. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, a lot of people could view it as something scary. I really challenge people to just look and say, if this were a change that elevated humanity on a massive scale, I think if you really believed that, you would go through the dark night of the soul of this world to help bring the future to a better place. And that's kind of how I feel. I'm just like, I have no fear around it. I have been expecting this for it feels like most of my life. And I have nothing but anticipation. I do have reverence for it. I have a deep respect for it. I expect that there will be moments of grief and there's going to be moments of awe and shock. But this is a huge turning point in history. This is the ending of an era, and you have to have an ending to have a beginning. You have to. That's the way this all works. That's the way life works. And this is all a mirror of this reality here. So yeah, don't take any of this as fear. I think it's fun to give some thoughts about how this might look. And I think to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And I feel it's just within you. It's really addressing any fears that come up in you and watching what you tune into. Because if it is perpetuating fear of war, fear of this, fear of that, fear of toilet paper, recognize that and just go, am I in my own body? And am I ready to make this right choice
yeah,
for me here? So,
yeah,
yeah, I would say stay tuned. I think the next few months are going to be um, interesting as far as like what we share and the content. And, I'm going to be leaving comments on this podcast. So if there are things you would like us to talk about um, or circle back on, we of course welcome that at any point in time.
yeah. All right, guys, have an awesome week. We'll catch you next time.
See you guys later.
See ya.